Welcome to Beyond Fringe, an organic podcast discussing the topics beyond the fringe of this or any other reality. On this podcast, we explore cryptids, cryptonology, paranormal activity, lost legends, aliens, government conspiracies, historic mysteries, lost treasures, forbidden archaeology, and the edge of reality. I am the Cryptid guy, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Daniel Tiny Hurst. Together, we explore the world beyond fringe. Tiny, how are you doing, brother?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Been outside all day working on the soup squatch and, trying to get some stuff straight on it. But otherwise,
The
good to
soup
go,
squatch.
man. Yes.
I'm glad you came up with the name.
I'm doing much better now that I'm single than I ever did when I wasn't single. It's funny how that happens.
Well, you get more time to focus. You have more money, more time, more focus. You get things done.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. So, Tiny, we have been gone for quite a while.
Yes, sir.
So why don't you do a quick check-in and tell everyone what you've been up to? Because for most of our viewers, they don't know what you've been up to. They don't know you got a new job. They don't know how you've been feeling. So why don't you kind of fill everyone in what's been going on? I'll do the same thing, and then we'll hit today's topic.
Man, mostly it's been working for me. It's work and it's been healing. While I was sick for the past couple of years, I'm doing tons better. I can walk right again, get all that done. Got a new job I'm real happy with, delivering and setting up medical equipment, believe it or not. Do a lot of driving out into some remote places here in North Carolina, which is real good for me. Had some interesting experiences already. Been working two jobs, actually. One with is became a tour guide with the haunted Asheville tours.
Wow.
Here in Asheville. That's been pretty fun.
That's an exclusive gig. You got to know someone to get that kind of job.
I do. I've got a connection or two.
You got a couple of connections. Tiny,
Yeah.
People are going to ask. So you had a really, really awesome experience while you were delivering a tank somewhere. Why don't you tell everyone about that? Because this is just still plain cool.
Well, I had a patient that didn't want me in the house, and with COVID going on right now, that's pretty common. And what we do is we set everything up on the porch, and then we call them, say, look, everything's set up, this is how it works, and so forth and so on. Well, while I'm setting this up, I noticed that all the dogs in the area are just going ape. And to kind of set up the area a little bit, it's an area that I would have never expected to have an encounter, much less at 10 a.m. in the morning. But it's kind of a hollow. And on the far side is a few residential places and forest. And I'm on the other side in residential area. Behind that is forest, but there's a dip in the middle. And like I say, all the dogs are going, hey. And I hear on the other side of the ridge, I hear what I initially thought was a man. And he goes, and it just got impossibly loud. It was impossibly long. And had it only happened that one time, I would probably just kind of pass it off. But I couldn't help but think, dude must have serious lungs to be that loud and that long. And, my investigator had to stand at that point. And directly I hear a goat over that same direction. And this goat starts screaming. And I'm not talking like you're screaming goat on the internet. I'm talking like, oh crap, it's got me, help me, type screaming. And then it abruptly stopped. And right behind that, I hear, again. Impossibly loud, possibly long. And at that moment, I knew what I was hearing.
And what do you think you were hearing, Tiny? Because I know what you were hearing.
I was here in a spot, and he got him some breakfast is what he done. That poor goat, man. I feel sorry for the goat, but
and you were at work. You weren't even doing an investigation, folks. This is the kind of luck Tiny has. Tiny's out at work, and he has a Sasquatch encounter at work. At what time was that? Were you just starting your day off too?
It was, well, yeah, that was my first stop, but it was 10 a.m. in the morning, and I mean, it's in an area I would have never thought there would be an experience. And, after I realized what was happening, I wanted so bad to go get them woods, man. So bad, but, I was on the clock, so I couldn't.
And not a whole
lot and all that stuff. But,
for those listening, Tiny, he calls me not too far after, or not too long after this happened. And I just happened to be by the computer, and I Googled it real quick. And that particular area this happened in, of course, butts up against what, Tiny?
National Forest.
Massive tract of land. Massive. So I wasn't surprised. I was surprised it happened like that. I'm surprised it happened that early in the morning. But when we found out the general area, I wasn't surprised about that. So, Tiny, along with that, you've had some other stuff going on. And for those of you who don't know, Tiny's organization, Hurstparanormal and Cryptid, they do an ongoing event at a place called the Dual and Piano Bar, and it's owned by a friend of ours. And that specific building, in my opinion, is just, what's the technical term I use, Tiny? Haunted to all but Jesus?
Yeah, sounds about right.
That's about right. So, while we've got you talking about stuff that you've been going on and things you've been doing, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on at the Dual and Piano Bar in our local Asheville? And I tell you something else. Did you know it was open?
Yeah, he finally got to open up about 2 weeks ago now, I think it is. And he had to change the way he done things a little bit, but he's back open and doing good. So if anybody's in your area, go check him out. It's a fun place.
Awesome place.
And it's haunted, but there's nothing malicious in there.
No.
And I firmly believe that, I mean, this has been a place for people to go drink and socialize since the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's still what's going on, spirits there. But honestly, the scariest thing in there is his piano players, if you ask me. And if you want to check those out, if anybody wants to check those out, he does a live stream every Saturday night, so you can watch his piano players duel, and they sing, and it's a fun place. Go check it out. But 2-3 weeks ago now, he sent me a video. It was just before he opened back up, and he had fish bowls on his bar, and 2 of those fish bowls just jumped off the shelves. Nothing had been moved since April. And
that video is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, they just jump off the bar for no reason. So we call, thanks to being the owner, we call the entities there, and I believe there's multiple entities there. We call them Frank. And we call him Frank with love, honestly, because we don't have a better name, but the place has never let me down. It has never let me down, man. Everybody that I've ever taken in there has had personal experience.
We actually did a live podcast from there, and we were having electrical equipment problems we never had before.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole place died. We were battery drained. It was ridiculous in there. So, yeah, I mean, the place is cool.
You remember when we did the live stream investigation there? And, everybody that was watching swore the Captain Morgan statue was trying to talk.
Yeah, you never know with that place. And again, that's just one of those cool places. And again, it's nothing you have to worry about. It's not going to follow you home. It's not going to cause any problems. It's just kind of like, I think it's just a localized entity. But it's just a real cool place. And Daniel does reoccurring investigations there. Are you going to be doing any more coming up, or you haven't gotten that far ahead yet?
Well, we've been talking about it, and it's all about scheduling right now. And, work is getting more solidified. You know, for a while I've been working 7 days, a lot of overtime, things like that. But it's getting more solidified, so I can start doing a few more things like that. So that's coming up. Watch the website, the Facebook pages, things like that.
And of course, we'll be talking about that pretty much every show, simply because 2 reasons. 1, it's an incredible spot, and 2, the owner, Ben, is a friend of ours, and anytime we can help out a friend, we will do that. So, Tiny, I'm just going to say what everyone's going to ask us: why have we been gone so long? And the truth of the matter is I hate blaming COVID-19, but the COVID-19 has just delayed our investigations. Cryptid-wise, our investigations are probably backed up 9 months. Paranormally, they're probably backed up, would you say probably a year?
Yeah, easily.
To do a proper investigation. And the reason for that is simply it's COVID. You know, we can't go in and do the investigations the way we need to, and we're not going to do a half-hearted attempt on anything. People have been calling us, wanting us to look at stuff, and of course we want to do it. But the truth of the matter is you have to put everyone's safety first. So we have been planning many future investigations. We are still doing the cryptid cave theory system that should, if everything goes well this summer and the COVID thing kind of dies down, we will be doing that this summer. We will also be doing the underwater graveyard investigation this summer if everything goes as planned. So we've got a lot of things coming up. We are also revamping the webpage and some other things we're doing. And we're thinking about doing a little bit of advertising. And other than that, it's just been, you know, between work and everything else and the family and the holidays are finally over now. So I kind of feel like things always do a little better once the holidays are out of the way because you have more time to focus.
Yeah.
So Tiny, on today's podcast, guess what we're talking about?
A little bit of everything, usually.
That'll still happen. Today, we're going to do something we haven't really done a whole lot of. And if you read our intro liner, it's part of the things we investigate. We're going to be talking about UFOs. Now, I did not know when we were coming up with this idea. For those of you who don't know, I have a book I write our podcast ideas in, and if Tiny gets one, he just emails me the idea, and we put it in the book. And that's kind of how we keep track of things. And I think we've got 75, 80 ideas that we still haven't even touched yet. And the thing with the way we do things is this one episode will probably branch off into 3 others because we'll touch on something that we find all this other information about. So that's why we call it an organic podcast. We're not, shackled to one specific.
You know what else?
What was that, brother?
You know what else we could call it?
What could we call it?
Paranormal ADD.
I like that. Well, I'm stealing that. I'm going to pretend I came up with that. That is the paranormal ADD kicks in. And actually, the paranormal ADHD, because we're both hyper.
Yeah.
The paranormal ADHD, we'll use that. I'm gonna actually put that in the liner notes, Tiny. So paranormal ADHD, no problem. So that's done. Maybe we'll call that. That's what we'll call the show today. Paranormal ADHD.
There you go.
We're gonna be talking about UFOs. Now, Tiny, I didn't realize that there is some declassification going on right now that is supposed to be out in 2 weeks. I haven't heard a whole lot about this. I was just briefly told that the entire UFO phenomenon is supposed to be declassified. Have you heard about this?
I have a little bit. I've honestly not delved into it too much, but yeah, it's there's a timeline for it to happen. I'm not sure what's going to happen if it doesn't, but there's a countdown on it right now.
Is there? See, to me, that's just fascinating because I wonder why they're doing it now. All the stuff going on in the world. You think it's just kind of, okay, oh, by the way, that's out there. Those are real. And we still have the COVID issue to deal with?
Well, I think that it's been trying to happen for a while, and I think the ones that are interested in the declassification were able to finally sneak something in one of these bills without, the ones that doesn't want it declassified seeing it, so it actually made it through this time. But, you know, I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I'll probably repeat myself a few times, but we're on the cusp of something big, and I don't know if that's, you know, alien related. I don't know if it's paranormal or, you know, all the above.
Yeah, we've talked about this. Yeah, we've talked about this, and you and I both agree that the veil that I guess envelops the paranormal, the UFOs, the aliens, the cryptids, everything, that veil is just getting thinner and thinner, and I agree with you. I think we are destined to see something probably sooner than later. That's my opinion, and I know that's yours too. But you know what I'm wondering, and this is just because of the time frame. I'm wondering if this information was supposed to come out, and then the new administration coming in will stop it from coming out. Do you think that's a possibility too?
Yeah, well, of course it's a possibility. I mean, you know, I don't know. Politics-wise, I don't keep up a whole lot because it's all a freak mess. Mm-hmm. But I don't really understand the why. As far as UFOs and aliens, I don't understand the why of why we want to keep it that secret. I mean, because, you know, what's the percentage of people that believe in extraterrestrial life? It's large.
It's pretty good. Yeah, we looked at that not too long ago. I don't have the number off the top of my head, and because I don't have it in front of me, I don't want to give the wrong number. But I remember you and I were talking about it, and it was pretty large. In fact, if you want to Google that real quick, that'd be kind of cool. Because I'm curious as to that. I know that 14% of the population in this country believes in Bigfoot. That statistic may have changed since the last time I looked it up. But the fact is that there's a whole lot of people out there that believe in UFOs. There's organizations dedicated to extraterrestrial, I guess, identity mapping and contact. And it just is hard for me to believe that we are the only ones in this part of the galaxy and the universe. So just by being the optimist I am, I'm guessing there's probably hundreds of billions of worlds out there that are probably capable of having life, and we have no idea how old those planets are and how advanced their civilizations are. That's just my humble opinion. What do you think?
I think it's arrogant to think that we're the only life in these multi-universes.
I give you that.
But according to this site, nearly half of the world population believe in extraterrestrial.
It's like 48%, right? It was 48,
yeah,
something like that. Okay, yeah, now think about it, that's a lot. That is a lot.
So, in that same thought process I have is, you know, if that means people already believe in it, why keep it classified? I mean, we already believe as a whole that, you know, we have technological advancement from, you know, retrofitting alien technology.
And we're going to talk about that.
If we do, why not admit it?
Because it doesn't. You know why I think they honestly, I can understand why they didn't admit that in the past, because it would have made the country look weak. Oh, we had to steal this technology. We couldn't come up with it on our own. But the truth of the matter is, the way we're going to handle today's discussion is we're going to go in a chronological order, starting in 1945. Now, the truth is, there were UFO sightings in the first settlements of this country. And a great resource to look at this stuff is, and I don't usually do this, and I don't know if we can, but I don't think they'd have a problem with it. If you go to the historychannel.com, they have amazing reference material and firsthand accounts of UFO sightings, and they've done just a remarkable job with that. In fact, I'm a huge fan of the History Channel and the historychannel.com as a resource. But they have reports back to the original colonies here, you know, and Jamestown and all that kind of stuff. So it is something that goes back further than what we're going to talk about. If you look at the history of Columbus, allegedly Christopher Columbus ran into some UFOs on the way here to America. So it does go further back than that. And of course, you can bring in the ancient, civilizations, the Toltecs, the Mayans, the Aztec, the Incas, all of that. And we can always tie all that in with UFOs and aliens. But for today's podcast, we are talking from 1945 to the current times. And we're going to just be covering, like I said, just little pinnacle parts of UFO history and things that have happened. Now, the other reason why we're only doing this, and again, the term broad strokes, Tiny, is what I want to use here, is because literally on every topic we're going to talk about, you could do a whole month's worth of shows. There's that much information out there. So when we are talking about this, if the listeners have a comment or they want us to talk about something specific, if they could just email us or put it in the comments, we look at those and we will definitely acquiesce. But I wanted to start off in the year 1945, Tiny. You remember 1945? Was that was BT before Tiny?
Well, that was, I've slept since then. So
in 1945, World War II pilots report seeing anomalies which they refer to as Foo Fighters. And I guess the term Foo Fighters was just a generic term for lights in the sky they couldn't explain. They also have reports of what they call spacecraft and something designated as flying saucers. Now, all these reports and all these sightings continue after World War II. Now, what always makes me a little weary about this particular time frame is we're not seeing it pre-World War II. Well, we are seeing it, but it's not as relevant and it's not as, I guess the word as often as we were seeing it during World War II. But my thoughts, and this is just me, I think towards the end of World War II, when Oppenheimer and his crew are working on the atom bomb, this is when we start having more and more UFO contact. Do you think that is a reason why we were having more UFO contact is because of the nuclear bomb?
Well, if you have a herd of goats and you're watching your herd of goats and all of a sudden one of those goats figures out how to sharpen the stick and use it as a weapon, you're going to pay a little bit more attention. So,
very true.
What?
Yeah, you're right.
So in that case, if a higher intelligence is watching us, this soap opera here on Earth, and we become that much more dangerous, then yeah, I think so.
I agree. I think the timeline is very relevant here because they were been seen, of course, throughout the historic account, but it becomes much more relevant towards the end of World War II, and of course moving forward. Now, the pinnacle year for the UFO phenomena in this country, all right, is 1947, specifically July 8th, 1947, because a little incident happens in a place called Roswell, New Mexico. Now, Roswell, in my opinion, and again, Tiny, this is just my opinion. Everyone else can have a different opinion. This is just from my research and the way I look at things. Roswell is the quintessential element for what happens for the next 60, 70 to 80 years. All right? Because I think when Roswell happens, that changes pretty much the world. Now, for those of you who don't know what happens in Roswell on July 8th, 1947, there's an alleged crash of a vehicle that's extraterrestrial in nature. Depending on who you listen to or what you read, it had biological entities on it that may or may not have been friendly to the people and inhabitants of this planet. And we're not exactly sure what happens to those pilots of the spacecraft or the wreckage. However, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. But when Roswell happens, they actually, on the front page of newspapers, it goes out over the UP, UFO crash in Roswell, New Mexico. And the next day, they cover it and say it's a weather balloon. Now, Daniel, you're a very intelligent man. Why do you think they would come out and be honest and then all of a sudden flip the script?
Because the people that were being honest hadn't been contacted by the people that wanted to cover it up yet.
Now, that is exactly what I was looking for. I was hoping you would say that. Folks, we did not prep for this. We did not talk about this one. We're going off our outline. And, Daniel says whatever Daniel wants to say, and I say whatever I want to say. That's why we have the organic podcast. But I was hoping he would say that. And here's why. Because, Tiny, say that again.
Because the people reporting hadn't been contacted by the people that wanted it hush-hush yet.
Exactly. At this point in the game, I don't think they had the organization. I like to call it the blanket statement, the organization. All right. I don't think they had the organization in place yet to handle this kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, I don't think they thought this was ever going to be an issue. And when I say they, I mean the powers that be. What do you think about that? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think there were likely organizations that, kept an eye on things, but they weren't as proactive as they are now. The ability to be that proactive wasn't there either. I mean, information traveled slower back then. Now it's pretty much instantaneous.
All right. And that's right. Exactly. Information wasn't as fast then. But now, still in 1947, all right, July 8, Roswell happens. Now, allegedly, in early September of 1947, Majestic 12 rolls out of the bullpen, and they take over anything and everything related with UFO sightings. Now, additionally, in mid to late 1947, you have Majestic 12 forming. This just also happens to be the birth of one of my favorite topics. You know them, you love them. I'm talking about the MIBs, the Men in Black. They start to be seen at reported UFO sightings. Their sole purpose seems to be to keep witnesses quiet about what they've seen, and they do this with threats and intimidation tactics designed to scare people into submission and silence. Now, once more, this seems to be a connection to Roswell because of the time frame. So you go from July, August, September, right? So within 2 months, maybe less, you now have a blanket agency that's going around controlling everything. And I'm not just talking about the MIBs, Tiny. I'm talking about you've got Majestic 12. Now, the problem with this is, the same time this is going on, the KGB develops their own UFO task force, and they keep very detailed records. However, as of lately, we find out that the Russian government goes back to keeping UFO records as far as 1901. Now, how does that make sense? We've got a government here that we've been here for over 200 years at this point, and we're not keeping records. Do you think there was an organization, maybe something like the X-Files, maybe in Hoover's FBI, maybe prior to that, that was keeping a tab on these things?
Absolutely.
I think that's where they got Majestic 12. Now, allegedly, Majestic 12, they got the name Majestic just because that was the call sign for the top secret organization, but there was 12 members, and they were politicians, businessmen, tycoons, and people in the educational field, professors, doctors, things like that. I've seen lists of people that were allegedly on it, and I'm not going to read any of the names because the truth is we don't know 100% they were there. And we know this all happened allegedly during the Eisenhower administration, but again, we're not solidified 100% in stone this happened, so we're not going to mention any names. But the fact of the matter is 1947 seems to be the pinnacle year for when everything starts. And you know what else starts in 1947, Tiny? Just by happenstance.
Ghostbusters.
Close. The Cold War starts. Now, why do you think the Cold War just happened to start in 1947?
Maybe over some certain information and certain
technology that could be changing.
Technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking part of the reason for the Cold War, besides the political ideology, was the fact that the Russians and those countries, along with Russia, they knew we had the technology from other civilizations. Now, I've always wondered this. As a historian, I've done a lot of research on World War II. Did you know, Tiny, that it took up till the 1970s for the United States to catch up with the U-boat technology from Germany from the 1940s in World War II?
I did not.
And to this day, they're still not sure why Germany was so far advanced technology-wise. And this throws open another theory. And this theory is that Hitler had help from aliens and other civilizations. Now, whether or not that's true, I'm not sure. That's a whole different show. That's something different. But if it was possible, and that did happen, and the Russians caught wind of that, and then Roswell happens, they had no way of getting their own alien tech. So I can understand why that would put them in a bad mood, can't you?
Yeah. Yeah, because none of the world's superpowers wants the other one to be more super.
Right, and at this point in time, they still didn't have the bomb. So it's a very, very, very interesting thought process. Again, it's a whole different show. There's so many factors in all of these points we're making. But then, Daniel, something happens in 1951, because in 1951, Majestic 12 seems to be dissolved. It just disappears. Now, there's other theories about that. There's theories that people actually that were on Majestic 12, on the council of the Majestic 12, wanted to release all this information globally about aliens and alien technology. And then, there's other arguments that that's not what happened. There's arguments that the Air Force decided they were going to take over the whole project. So they don't dissolve Majestic 12. They actually turn it into something called Operation Blue Book. And when Operation Blue Book is in effect, it is sent to replace the former classified project of Majestic 12, and that seems to be the focal point for all of the UFO and strange phenomenon evidence to be sent. In other words, if someone has a phone call, they get in touch with basic Operation Blue Book operatives, and then that is investigated. But here's my question: is why does Blue Book take over the UFO investigations? Why do they shelf Majestic 12? And
they did.
I don't think they did either, but that's what they say in the government archives. They actually say that Majestic was dissolved in 47, or I'm sorry, in 51. And now we're going to get to that too. Now, here's another point. Does Operation Blue Book officially begin in 1947 or 1951? Because here's why I'm saying that, Tiny. There's a thought and that some people have that along with Majestic, Blue Book had already been in inception and been working, and here's why. Here's how it worked, allegedly. If someone reports a UFO sighting and Blue Book is in the background waiting to hear what Majestic says. So if Majestic says, okay, hey, there was definitely something here, then Blue Book comes in. Now, my question is this: was Blue Book the forerunner or the organization that was controlling the MIBs? Are they the ones that said, okay, we need to go talk to these people and keep them quiet? Because to me, that would kind of make sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, you could have Majestic 12 being kind of the hood ornament for the real thing, too.
Exactly. So they have plausible deniability at this point. So people can say, hey, we're with Majestic 12, we're investigating this, but then they send the muscle in later to shut everyone up, but they're not part of Majestic 12. They're part of Blue Book. So they've got plausible deniability there. To me, that makes sense. But it gets better, Tiny, because from 1951 to 1969, they investigate 12,618 cases of undetermined phenomena and causes. Out of all of these cases, they come up with excuses for every one of them, Tiny, except 701 cases That's still a lot. They remain to this day unexplained, and they were not investigated publicly. Now, for those of you who want to research this and see this information for yourself, if you go to www.archives.gov/research/military/Air Force UFOs, it'll put it all right there for you. It's all the declassified documents that goes into all of this paper. Everything we're talking about now basically came from the government websites, decommissioned stuff, and declassified things. So this is another case of what we're talking about. It's just blatantly out there for anyone to look at it. Some of this is also off the the FBI website. What is that called? The bunker or the open bunker, something like that. But if you go to the website for the FBI, it's also right there. Now, up until now, let's just say Tiny Worth year 1961. All right, up until 1961. Everything that has to do with UFOs and aliens has pretty much been kept, I guess we can all agree, at an arm's length. People don't really talk about it. It makes great entertainment because people are making movies out of it. That's all Hollywood at this point in time is doing. It's all about space movies and aliens and people from Venus and things like that. It's what we call the desensitization that you and I have talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
Right? However, in September 1961, everything changes because while driving back from a short vacation, a couple named Betty and Barney Hill, and they're residents of a place called Portsmouth, New Hampshire, are driving through the White Mountains when they see lights in the sky and they're following them. Now, Barney, I believe, was an ex-vet. He's a nice guy. He gets out. He actually stops his car. He gets out, takes a look around. They're gone. Then he gets in his car, they start driving again, and they're back. Now, what happens next changes the UFO phenomenon forever because the Hills are the first publicly reported abduction case ever looked into. All right? This goes global. People abducted by aliens in a UFO in the White Mountains. Now, these are stand-up people. Everyone believes them. They actually had medical exams. They actually go through regressive hypnosis. They both have the exact same story. At one point, they both draw maps, and the maps they draw while under hypnosis are a look at our universe from, I believe, the Alpha Centauri section. They both describe the medical procedures and the things that happened to them. But here's my question. Every time something else had happened, when it comes to UFOs, aliens, or anything, the MIBs are right there keeping a lid on it. No one's going to talk about it. Why was this story allowed to go public, Tiny? And why was it allowed to be reported? That's what I don't understand.
I think at some point you have to let some stuff out so you can create turmoil with it. You can create disbelief with it. And the powers that be can look at that and go, really? You believe this? Don't this seem a little far-fetched? Blah, blah, blah. You know, same thing with always finding the most redneck person to describe what the tornado sounded like. Or, you know, Bigfoot's beautiful hair. Things like that.
You know I love that guy.
I know.
But do you think this is what they did? Do you think this story is so far out of bounds, no one's going to believe it? If we let this go, this is going to be great cover for us because no one will believe that people actually got abducted. This is also where time loss happens. Their car stopped. Like, I mean, so this is like the antithesis, or I'm sorry, the apotheosis of everything about the modern day abduction scenario happens to the Hills. And they stick with their story. They never repudiate it. They say till the day they both died that this is exactly what happens. Now, you brought up a real good point there, and that's got me thinking. The grander the story, the better to hide behind. So if you've got the powers that be saying, hey, wait a minute, we can keep the kibosh on this, or if we let it out, they're going to think these people are insane.
Um, the thing is, though, that worked back then.
Yeah.
That no longer works now.
Well, that's in 1961. That's when, you could trust everyone in the government. If the government said something, you believed them.
Exactly. Now it does work. The more flamboyant the story is, the more it's believed in a lot of cases. So that might be part of why they're ready to be classified too.
You know what? You got a point there. I think another reason why they might be ready to be classified, and again, we are not here at Beyond Fringe. We are not political. We don't discuss politics. It's not our thing. But I think with all the melee and just insanity that's been going on the last couple months, this might take some heat off of things. Because now, we might realize that we have to work together as maybe, I don't know, the human race. And to me,
nothing will pull a bunch of people together like a common enemy.
Exactly. What's funny is you say that. I was recently listening to my old iPod Touch that I found. And there was a lot of music in there from post 9/11. And it amazes me how what you just said is right. Nothing will pull a civilization or a country or a species together than a common danger. And I think that's very appropriate now as far as what's been going on in our part of the world. And if it is true and they are going to release this information, do you think that's going to put things back together? Do you think that's going to unify the public?
Not unless they come out with something like, we have the mothership in orbit with guns pointed at us and, they're going to destroy us within 30 days, it's blah, blah, blah. I mean, other than an immediate threat, an immediate life danger, no.
See, I understood years ago, Tiny, the reason why governments around the world could not just admit that these things were out there. And it's the same thing they do with cryptids. You can't sit there and expect the common man or the common woman or the common person. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be, rude to anyone, but the common person to accept this without having to have a few short circuits in their brain. Because if these things are real, then how come we haven't been honest with everyone in the past? Is it because if you sit there and admit that, oh yeah, we're not alone in the universe, does that affect religion to the point where it's going to there'll be an upheaval in civilization? I don't think so. I think maybe 60 years ago that might have been the case. I think we have been so desensitized from the media about aliens, Bigfoot, all cryptids, any kind of, transdimensional things, all things of that nature. I guess anything under our umbrella of the paranormal, or what we would call beyond the fringe of reality. I think the public can handle it now. What do you think?
I think the majority can. I think that, and it's not even because necessarily the desensitization, that is a part of it, but, there's people a lot of people that have, for lack of a better way, or a better word, that have ascended into the belief system that there is more out there. And I think that honestly, I think it's just a normal progress in a civilization. And I think we're at that point now to where it wouldn't be that big a deal if we did find out, for sure. Most people believe and, so forth. But if there was hardcore evidence laid down in front of it, I think that the majority of the population will be okay with it. They'll be like, oh,
I agree.
Okay.
And I don't think the religious sections of the society would bother too much with it either, because I'm a man of faith. I'm religious. I know you are too. It wouldn't bother. I expect it. I believe it's real to begin with, so it doesn't bother me. If the truth comes out, I'm going to be happy. But I don't think it'd be a big deal for a lot of people. I mean, look at the Vatican. The Vatican has one of the biggest radio telescopes on the planet. What are they using that for? I mean, it is what it is. I honestly think that if this information comes out, I think, again, this is just me, this is just the Cryptid guy's thoughts here, I think it'll probably unify us as a country and as a planet. because when people start realizing it, it might take a little bit, Tiny, but when people start to realize that, wait a minute, there's another whole civilization. Maybe there's millions of civilizations out there. Maybe not all of them are friendly. Maybe we need to learn to get along, and maybe we need to start working on our own technology and figure out how we're going to take care of ourselves. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, to me, that's kind of idealistic because human nature is a hard thing to get around. But I think what it might do is give people hope that there is better. You know, that right now we're, as a whole, in a slump as, you know, humanity, but it can get better. We can evolve and we can grow. You know, it's just, I guess, a different side of the coin. I don't think that we'll ever stop fighting amongst ourselves. That's just human nature. We're created flawed like that. But I think that the unity might come from people going, okay, there's something new. There's something else to distract us. Maybe we can learn something. Maybe there's help.
I mean, it's possible.
You know?
I mean, you know, like I said, again, I try to be an optimist when things like this happen because I personally would like to see, you know, the world become a better place, not just for us, but for, you know, the generations to follow. And if we don't start getting it together, there probably is not going to be a whole lot more generations to follow. Now, we can both agree that the Betty and Barney Hill incident in 1961 kind of changes the whole way we look at aliens and UFOs. Can we both agree on that?
Yeah.
Now, here's where it takes another turn. Up till then, Betty and Barney Hill are probably the most famous abduction case dealing with the UFO phenomenon until November 5th, 1975. 14 years later, Betty and Barney Hill were abducted. A man named Travis Walton is abducted in front of several witnesses, including 2 of his brothers and I think 4 associates that he worked with. He disappears. He is abducted in front of them by an alien aircraft. He's put in his white light and he's brought up there. I think that's where that all came from, Tiny. Like when you see those abduction stories, they're frozen in that white light. And yeah. That's my belief. This is where all that comes from because this is what happens to this guy. When Walton comes back, he resurfaces 5 days later, and he starts to give this horrifying story about the abduction, and it was basic torture. And this becomes the single most famous abduction story ever recorded. The incident becomes a best-selling book, and then a movie called Fire in the Sky. Have you ever seen that?
I have. It's been years ago, but yeah, I've seen it.
Love that movie. Now, if anyone wants to do more research on Travis Walton, you can go to www.traviswalton.com, and the whole thing is just right there. So this is a very, very short synopsis of what happened with him, but it is an incredible story. I, for one, believe it. He got nothing but ridicule for this. He was accused of fraud. All his friends and family almost went to jail. They were convinced that he was, a hoaxer, and it was not a good time for him and his family. But that movie and things he depicts about the alien abduction scenarios and the medical testing also corroborates things that happened 14 years prior with Betty and Barney Hill. So here's my question, Tiny. In that 14-year time span, how many stories or abduction scenarios do you think were kept quiet by Operation Blue Book or the MIBs?
Probably a lot.
Now, my thought process on the Travis Walton case is the only reason why this got mentioned at all is because they were basically accusing all his crew and everyone of, I think, wasn't it, they thought they murdered him or they killed him?
Yeah.
And that's how the whole, and that's why, so I'm guessing that the powers that be probably didn't pay much attention to it in the beginning. And then when the whole story comes out and Walton shows back up, There is a true storm brewing because of this. I think a lot of people that see this movie or read this book probably this more than the Betty and Barney Hill incident, because you can actually like see it in the movie. I think this probably makes people believers. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's always that one thing that makes you think. You know, for people like me and you, it's the Legend of Boggy Creek.
Yep. And how many times did you watch that as a kid? Like on, you know, with the rabbit ears going, that's got to be
few.
Real. That's got to be
A
real.
few. And you know, I'm still looking for a copy of that movie, and I can't find it.
I watch it. You know what's funny? I'm going to say this. It's in my favorites on YouTube. Like, there's a few things I watch every once in a while when I'm like cryptidly. That's a word I just came up with. When I'm doing the cryptonology, you know, or the cryptid work, and I run into a wall and I just can't figure something out, I'll watch a couple things that I've seen a million times. One of them is the Bigfoot movie. You know, the Bigfoot, you know, they're investigating Bigfoot in the 70s. The other one is Boggy Creek. And then, of course, my go-to, and I don't know how many times I've watched this one, but In Search of Leonard Nimoy, about our hairy friend. I
miss those.
You know, I gotta miss that guy. I wish he had done more. He was just like, there's just never going to be another Leonard Nimoy. I know we've said that before, but he deserves to be mentioned as much as possible. I mean, he was Spock, dude. Spock.
Yeah.
Spock.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a question we've asked, you know, each other and guests that we've had on the show and been asked 100 times about Bigfoot. But say we're out Bigfoot hunting, all right? And we're out in the middle of the woods somewhere, up in the triangle.
Yeah, I kind of figured you would bring that up. I thought that's where you were going.
And we're out there, we're hanging out, and all of a sudden, the sky lights up, a beam comes down, and there's E.T. standing in front of us. What would your first reaction be?
I hope I don't soil myself. I don't know. Probably just the same thing we do every time we find something tiny and be completely bewildered. I mean, you know, I think honestly, if I'm being honest, I'd be concerned about the safety of myself and the people with me at first. But and then the curiosity would kick in, and you know, I'm looking for, you know, some improvements to the Subaru. So I'm thinking to myself, maybe they can give me warp drive. I don't know. It would depend on whether or not they were friendly, because they could land, show up, and then just ionize us, turn us to dust. Or they could abduct us and do medical experiments and then drop us in the middle of the woods 5 days later, and people think we're nuts. Or they could be friendly and say, hey, what can we do to help your planet out?
No, you know, I know you think it's because of the Neanderthal DNA that I have. We both have it. Yes. But I have some odd health issues. What if maybe I'm just a little bit alien?
It would not surprise me, because, you know, for those, you know, there's a reason why I call him Tiny. Tiny's just a real big guy. And, you know, and I'm not trying to sound like stereotypical or anything, but, you know, usually when most people see a guy your size, they're thinking, oh, look at this big idiot. And the truth of the matter is, you know, you're one of the smartest guys I've ever met. You know, there's not a whole lot you can't do. You can, you know, computer wise, you know, when it comes to electronics, anything. I mean, you're very, very, very highly intelligent. And so you're kind of like the non-stereotypical big guy. Does that make sense? So that would not surprise me. In other words, it would not surprise me. Because there's part of me, I'd be like, see, I told you. I'd have to call Josh right now and say, I told you.
But, you know, I've had my own UFO experience. I've had several of them.
I have seen things myself, but I've never had like an experience.
The place that I grew up, man, it was a power plant. Everything happened there. It was my own little Skinwalker ranch. And you never know, man. I mean, like, you know, I used to have bouts of sleep paralysis, and I believe that was because of
Tiny, let's be honest.
Issues.
Honestly, I think a lot of time paranormal issues are confused with, alien abduction.
Yeah, and that's where I was going. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't the old hag. Maybe she wasn't in. Maybe she wasn't able.
Well, I mean, think about it this way, and I'm not trying to get too personal, and if I am, please tell me, and we'll edit it out. But look at the size of you as compared to the size of your parents.
Yeah.
I mean, who's to say there wasn't a little genetic modification done? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And folks, just to clarify that, if you're interested at all, I'm 6'6", 330 pounds. Both my parents were 5'7", 130 pounds. I mean, it's like, my legs. So
yeah, and the other thing is, for those of you who don't know, Tiny's lost a bunch of weight, and prior to that, he used to work out like a beast. So he looked like a pro. When I first met him, I thought he was a pro wrestler. Actually, I was afraid I was going to be a smart mouth to him, but I didn't want to get slammed into a wall. But
you were a smart mouth.
I know, and that was me being careful. So I mean, but it would not, Tiny. It would not surprise me. I mean, I think these things happen. And you were definitely the area where you grew up. I mean, I don't know if you want to disclose it, but I mean, that's still to this day. We get cryptid reports, we get paranormal reports, we get all kinds of crazy stuff out of that particular area you're from. So, and let's be honest, the triangles, if we're being, geographically honest here, the triangle's really not too far from there either.
Not really. I mean, where I grew up there, I saw UFOs, I saw freaking fairies, I saw spirits, I saw orbs. I mean, you name it, it was there, and I had no good explanation for it, other than it was a power play. I'd really like one day, something I've never done, I would really like to look at some ley lines, see if it runs through where I used to live.
I've got a map with those somewhere. I'll email it to you. I think I've got it online, or I think I've got a digital copy. But I think actually the one, you remember the one I talked about where there's a specific element that I get?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I believe that does run right through there. But again, I'm not trying to play coy with the audience. There's just things, we're not ready to talk about. But I tell you something, Tiny, I think it would be actually really healthy for you at some point in the summer for us to go do an investigation out there, back from where you're from. I think that would probably answer a lot of questions. And the other thing is this, I've said this a million times, and I'll say it a million more. In my humble opinion, as a paranormal investigator, as the cryptid guy, as a cryptoid investigator, as all this research, as someone that studies as a historian, as someone that's done just mass amount of research in the Native American culture when it comes to these things, it's all somehow connected. I don't know how, but somehow it is all connected. And that's one of the driving forces that's one of the things that you and I agree with so much. And that's one of the things that just drives us to keep doing what we do, is somehow one little thing we find is going to lead to boom. It's going to be like the unified theory. We're going to figure everything out. And
the deeper you go, though, the weirder it gets and the more questions you have.
Weird ain't the word for it, brother. I mean, that's why sometimes you just sitting there looking at evidence or you hear a story, but you can corroborate it with something that happened 20 years prior, almost in the same area. I mean, it's just, it's just crazy. And you're right. Yeah. I think the longer we do this, the more questions you get. And it should be the opposite. We should have less questions and we end up with more. There's a good friend of ours that I was talking to the other day, and eventually we're going to have him on the show. But he's got the same problem. He goes, I've been doing this for 45 years, and every time I think I got something figured out, I got 10 more questions. So it's just one of those things. Or, I don't know if we're ever going to get to the bottom of it, but we're going to try.
It's and to say this for the audience, I don't mind saying, I grew up in Eastern Tennessee, and I won't say exactly where because it's not what it used to be anymore. I went and visited a few years back, and it's not the same. It's completely different, thanks to progress. But I grew up in Eastern Tennessee, and I would love to get back home and do a little work in that area. If anybody listening, you have leads or have something going on yourself, feel free to reach out to us. I'd love to get back in that area. I mean, we're not far away. It's an easy day drive.
Yeah, and the other thing is I'd love to go check that area out because the last time we were there, we had some issues happen. So, to this day, Tiny, UFOs are continually reported. Additional sightings and witnesses report, and they state the same things. They say when something very strange happened, eventually they get interviewed and harassed consistently by an alleged investigative branch of the government, and they're always dressed in black. And I know everyone's thinking, oh, you're coming back to the MIB thing again. There's a reason why I'm doing that. Because it's my belief that this specific organization just doesn't handle the UFO issue. I think it handles the cryptid and the paranormal. And every combination in between.
Well, it'd be because of that common connection with it.
Well, there you go. That's the other thing. We don't know. But you get reports of MIBs all over the world where something strange happens. And the other thing, it's always America ends up cleaning it up. Now, I don't know if we have a deal with the other countries on the planet. I would hope so. But it's like we're the experts in this field. I'm not, and by say we, I mean the country, not me or you or anyone else. But it seems like our government seems to be the experts in this field. Now, maybe that's just me as a proud American saying, that's the way it should be. But does that not seem the same to you?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really can't speak to that because I've not looked into other countries' views on it, to be honest. And I don't know. I mean, I couldn't imagine that, the tech countries like China, Japan, places like that wouldn't really be delving into some of that stuff. But, I don't know. I've not looked into it, so I really can't say.
But see, the other thing is, I don't know if there's like a global agreement that if something happens or something crashes, the U.S. comes and picks it up. I mean, I don't know. To me, that would make more sense because I think we've probably got the experience because of the before-mentioned 1947 Roswell incident. Now, that puts me on another topic here, Tiny. I know we've talked about this, you and I have talked about this, but one of my favorite books is something called The Day After Roswell. And in 1997, a retired colonel named Philip J. Corso writes The Day After Roswell, and it's published through Pocket Books. And in the book, Corso gives his personal details about how the Roswell incident led to the technology boom and basically led him and many other people to the realization that not only was there massive amounts of alien life out there, but there's a lot of it that didn't like us. And a lot of them don't want us around. And for some reason, maybe there's another organization keeping us safe. I don't know. But one of my favorite parts of this book, man, I'm looking at, I've got this copy. This is like one of my original copies. This is old. I'm going to read this. And this is from the book, The Day After Roswell. And it's in a chapter called, funny enough, Star Wars. And it's the last paragraph on page 292. And when I read it, I think you'll understand. Because I think people have different misconceptions about alien life. I mean, you see TV shows where aliens are depicted as good or bad, and there's no one different. You know what I'm saying? But this is Philip J. Corso's take on what he believes aliens really are. He says, these creatures weren't benevolent alien beings who had come to enlighten human beings. They were genetically altered humanoid automatons, cloned biological entities, actually, who were harvesting biological specimens on Earth for their own experimentation. As long as we were incapable of defending ourselves, we had to allow them to interlude as they wished. And that was part of what they were working. Our group had to deal with. We had negotiated a kind of surrender with them. As long as we couldn't fight them, they dictated the terms because they knew what we most feared was disclosure. Hide the truth, and the truth becomes your enemy. Disclosure, the truth, and it becomes your weapon. We hid the truth, and the EBEs used it against us until 1974, when we had our first real shoot-down of an alien craft over Rasmussen Air Force Base in Germany. Now, that was only a paragraph, Tiny, but tell me that's not some scary stuff.
Yeah. I think,
and this is coming from basically an authority on the subject, if you believe what he wrote.
There again, we were talking about the why, keep it quiet. Well, maybe it's as simple as that, because it's so freaking scary.
Well, the other thing is we couldn't protect ourselves. So, he even says it. We were basically acquiescent because we had no choice. So what changes in 1974? The technology. I think the fact that we were able to reverse engineer stuff from Roswell is what protected us. There's an old video clip, and I don't know if it's on YouTube or anything. I know we've talked about this in the past, but it's a retirement party for someone that ran one of the secret agencies and organizations the government has. And he's sitting there and he's talking, and I guess he ran it for almost 50 years. And a reporter was asking him questions. Now, I'm not going to give what organization it was, because the truth is I'm not 100% sure. So, but the gist of it was he was in a good mood, and he had a long time to think about it. And he looked at a reporter when the reporter simply asked him. The reporter said, what kind of technology do we really have? And he says, I want you to think about Star Wars, Star Trek, all this stuff you've seen on TV. He goes, we're about 60 years past all that. So what kind of technology do we really have that prevents us from being, just completely decimated by an alien civilization? Is that something you believe we have, or do you think that's just all a false flag?
No, I think we're definitely way ahead of what we believe we are technologically. What they let us, to they, to them, to those, what they let us know we have is old, obsolete technology compared to what's actually in the hands of those, to they, to them.
I agree.
And I think we're way more advanced than what we have now.
And for those of you who are listening to those, the they, and the them, we usually refer to them as the organization.
Yeah. The powers that be.
Exactly.
And I think that, a lot of people, I've had this discussion too with a couple of people, and speaking specifically about our government and say weaponized technology, they're like, well, they should tell us about it. We should know. Well, no, we shouldn't, because if that technology is there to protect us from whether it's other countries or other worlds, then it's better for our enemies not to know we have it. And if they tell us, well, everybody knows. It's just that simple.
I agree. That's why they have something called top secret. I think the government keeps things secret because they need to. You can't go around and show. I mean, let's just say hypothetically we actually have spaceship. That we just came out with a Space Force, which I think it's awesome. That's just me. I also think it's cool calling the people in the Space Force the Guardians. I think that's pretty sweet. But if you stop and think about it, Tiny, doesn't that kind of, if you look at it a different way, look at it the way we usually look at something, there's usually a little more into a name than just a name. And when you're calling an organization Guardians, what does that tell you?
Yeah. I can't help but think about Starship Troopers.
Yeah, I mean, it's not far-fetched. It really isn't. So let me ask you this, Tiny. What do you think's going on now? I mean, we still have current UFO and alien research going on. We still have UFO sightings. And my question is, at this time, in this day and age, are the MIBs really around the way they used to be, or do they just kind of pick and choose what they're going to go, put the kibosh on? And an example I'd like to give is this. Usually if someone sees a UFO now, they don't have a visit from anyone because it's kind of commonplace. But if someone has a cryptid encounter, and it goes to the point where there's something physical done or someone shoots at one, what's the first thing that usually happens?
Think about this. Maybe, but I'm going to go a little bit out there on you, okay?
I thought you would.
Maybe these cryptids are actually aliens. Maybe they're protected.
I mean,
maybe.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it's all possible. 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you and told you were crazy. Now it's not so crazy. I mean, it's possible. I personally think, I'll one up you. I'll one up you, Tiny. What if the cryptids are indigenous to this planet and we're the interlopers? How about that?
Well, people believe that we were put here as experiments. And, considering how we've destroyed this planet, that kind of makes sense.
It would not surprise me. It would not surprise me in the least bit. Now, I could understand if that was the case. I can understand why there's never going to be any reveal about that, because then you would destroy everyone's viewpoints on everything, pretty much. Tiny, let me ask you this real quick. And our last question I'm going to ask you: do you think, at any one of our investigations, at any point in time, we've ever encountered the MIBs?
If not the MIB, something very close.
Yeah. Which investigation are you thinking?
Haunted Woods.
Yeah, me too. That's where I was going with that. I still to this day think, and I said it that day, that I think we were running into something a little different than what we were usually running into, just from all that stuff that happened, and that's on prior podcasts.
Yeah, we just happened to be in a place where we shouldn't have been at that time. That's all it was.
Exactly. That's all it was. And since that time, that was the only time to this day, and we still have the memory of it, but to this day, I still don't think any of the photographic evidence survived from the computers going blank and all that other stuff happening. But I honestly think that's what we ran into. Well, Tiny? Yeah. Sorry, buddy. Go ahead.
I talked to a gentleman the other day that works intelligence, and he told me, he kind of laughed. He said he would be really shocked at how easy it is to remove data from electronic systems.
No, because it's happened to me and right in front of me, and there's nothing I could do about it. So no, it's not shocking to me at all. It's funny. The more it goes right back to that, Tiny. The more we learn, the more we need to know. Well, yeah. Tiny, that's all the time we have. We want to thank everyone for listening to Beyond Fringe. If you have a story or want to be a guest on the show, please contact us at beyondfringe001@gmail.com, or you can get us at 828-407-0046. Tiny, do you have anything else you want to say?
Other than if you would like, you can reach out to me directly at Hurstparanormal@gmail.com. And one other thought is life doesn't have to be described as what we see it. It doesn't have to be on 4 or 2 legs.
Doesn't have to be carbon-based.
Exactly. So something to think about there.
Yeah, because life can be, that's something most people, they always, when you say life, they automatically think it's going to look like us or something close. It could be completely different. It could be underwater. We just don't know. Again, we don't know. I am the Cryptid Guy. Ty and I want to thank you for listening. And remember, my friends, knowledge is power. And the only way to defeat the intentional veil of darkness that surrounds us all, battle the ignorance that shackles us to hatred and despair, and restore the balance, is to let the light in. So remember, my friends, always let there be light in your life and keep believing. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.